Hello, and a very warm welcome to this, our 21st Rare Webinar. I'm Rebecca Stewart, CEO here at Rare Revolution, and I'm supported in the background today by my colleague Becky Pender. So if you've got any technical questions, she will be able to help you out. I'm particularly excited by the topic of today's webinar, co-designing clinical trials for better outcomes. And with over 150 registrants today, it seems that you are too. We're delighted to have so many of you join us, and please take advantage of our Q&A function to ask any questions for our panelists. And thank you to those who sent questions in advance of today. So I'm thrilled to be joined by our wonderful panel today. I'd like to introduce you to Wes Michael, a long-term friend of Rare Revolution, founder and president of Rare Patient Voice. Wes founded Rare Patient Voice in 2013 to give patients and family caregivers the opportunity to voice their opinions through taking part in research studies. And they've now recruited for thousands of studies and rewarded patients and family caregivers for their participation. We are also joined by Mindy Cameron, President of Advocacy Works Consulting, and she's a long-time advocate for patient-centered research in neuromuscular and rare disease communities. Mindy is one of those rare professionals whose lived experience means that her expertise is founded in first-hand knowledge. And Mindy and her son, who lives with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, have participated in nearly a dozen research studies and clinical trials over the last 20 years. So thank you so much for joining us. Let's get stuck in. So, Wes, I'm going to come to you first. Co-design is a term that's been used in the rare landscape for a while now. But what is co-design and how is it different from simply gathering patient feedback?
I think that's the key question, and we'll probably be referring back to it in different ways throughout this because so much of the work we do is what you might call consultative, and that's fine and that's good. People give their opinions about things that the industry wants to hear about, but that's not what we're talking about with co-design. Um, I remember way back when I was this young guy in business and I met this older gentleman and he gave me a piece of advice and I didn't think much of it at the time, but it's so true. He said, people support what they help create. You can't just give opinions of, you want to be, if we have patients help creating this, they're going to support it. It's going to work. So this is about collaboration. It's about a two-way street. It's about engaging patients, not just getting their opinions, again, which that's fine for a lot of things. It's going beyond that. And one of the things that we found, and we'll refer to, we did a study a few months ago of over 2,000 patients about co-design. They want to be taken seriously. They don't want to just be, hey, they got my opinion and they did what they were thinking they wanted to do all. That's not taking people seriously. So that's the difference. It's a two-way process. It's helping create and it's being taken seriously.
Thanks. That's so important. And I love that message that you got right at the start of your career. What a great thing a great insight to get early on. Mindy, for you, how would you describe the current relationship between patients and trial designers? What's kind of going on at the moment as standard?
Well, I think that the Rare Patient Voice did a survey earlier this year, and they got a lot of respondents, over 2,000. Only 69%, 69% of the respondents were not aware that co-design even exists. And of those respondents, only 4% had actually participated in any co-design. So I think that was kind of the state of affairs. What I see in rare disease drug development is regulators want to know more about what sponsors did from inception of an idea all the way through studies for long-term follow-up. Regulators want to know how you're engaging with patients. The other big thing I see is siloing of the patient advocacy function within companies. I think we need to do a much better job about that. These patient advocacy functions within companies aren't just about patient programs and giving free giveaways out at conferences. This is about incorporating the feedback that these people get from patients. These are your staff, your team members that are out engaging with patients, learning from patients, attending conferences, learning about the whole spectrum of a progression of a disease. So use those people across your clinical development, not just for your patient programs. There's a lot of speculation about where the patient advocacy function even lives in a company. Is it commercial? Is it med affairs? It's everything. It's all things. So stop siloing your patient advocacy teams and get them involved because they are the ones that are talking to your patients. They're the ones that are going beyond advocacy groups and they're holding focus groups and they're having ad boards and they are learning what the patient experience is like. And that is foundational to clinical trial design.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And to that point, what other misconceptions do you think researchers or sponsors often have about patient expertise?
That it's singular. In this modern era, we talk on social media, we gather at conferences, we are talking to each other. So when you're talking to a patient, you're actually gathering experience from their whole community, not just them as a singular patient. I think patient input is very nuanced. So much depends on where a patient is in their disease progression, where they live, what kinds of services they have access to, what kind of health care they're getting, what kind of health care they can even access, whether they're traveling for care. For rare disease, this happens a lot. So there's a lot of nuance in learning about the patient experience. I also want to say something about when people first get a diagnosis like this, they don't know anything about clinical research. So they may not know anything about what drug development is, what needs to happen, why things fail, why some things are not put out in the public domain. But I can tell you that a rare disease patient or a parent of a rare disease patient learns quick, very, very quickly. And we become extremely well educated in not just our day-to-day lives, but in the whole ecosystem of the field that you're working in. So there is nobody more motivated than a patient or a caregiver to help you with your clinical trial design. No one.
I think it's a great point in that utilizing that part of the community as an ally in your trial to design for success is so important. So Wes, if we can come to you, what does that look like? What does meaningful involvement in a clinical design look like? You talked earlier on about that kind of collaborative back and forth
Right.
two-way, but what the practical steps that people need to do to ensure that their co-design is meaningful?
Yeah, I mean, one of the most important things is early. Do it early. Don't wait. You're never too early to start working with patients to figure this out. That the last thing we want or the patients want to see is to be a checkbox, right? Okay, we did that. We can check. No, no, no. You talk to them early, and work with them closely. The other thing I found was interesting. We found this in our survey. We asked people what was the most important aspect for patients to influence in design. And it was not about the endpoints, which are certainly very important. All the scientific things, the endpoints, the forms, the inclusion criteria. You know what they said the most important thing is support services for the participant. An everyday practical thing. How am I going to get there? Who's going to take care of my kids while I'm there? They need that. You're dealing with a whole person, right? And these are people that have lives to live. They're not just a patient with a disease. That's one piece, right? And so that's meaningful involvement is you got to think of that. And I love that they said that was the number one issue. I wouldn't have thought of that. Scientists would think, no, we got to get this right so we get the number right. That's all important. But from a patient standpoint, I love that you got to be practical. How's it changing their life and how can we make it work for them?
This really came to me. I did a stint as a consumer reviewer for a government agency that was doing some Duchenne research. And this was early level research, foundational studies. And some of it really didn't matter to patients. It really didn't. I mean, it might have looked great. It was very scientific. It was very well constructed and designed. Would patients really care? Would they participate in a trial for it? No. So there's a big, I love what you said about early involvement because I think it's key. It's never too early to ask a patient advocacy group, run a focus group. They're quick, they're relatively inexpensive, but get some early input as to, is this a meaningful target to pursue even? So critical.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see what you both think around this. So something that we hear a lot in the pushback against early engagement is the narrative that they don't want to give false hope to a community, because obviously at that very early stage, there's no guarantee that that the clinical trial will even happen, that we will even get that far. So what would be your response to that?
Well, Mindy,
Mm.
I would say, well, you could use that to justify at any stage not doing anything, because you can get to, some drugs get all the way through phase 3 and then they fail. So, I mean, I get it. That false hope is a horrible thing. You'll see an article in the paper and it's like something's 20 years away, but maybe they mitigate
Yeah,
it.
I can. Hope is a commodity. We, I don't know if you know much about the Duchenne muscular dystrophy space, but we have had a tremendous amount of drug development in the past 20 years. We have had things that replace the missing protein all the way down to things that treat the downstream side effects, or downstream effects of the disease. Plus, we have actually drugs that treat the side effects of our treatments. I mean, we have a very wide range of research, and we've had a lot of failures. And a lot of that, I think, might have been from trial design. We have things that were shelved early. We have had so many studies be called off early because of futility. We've had problems with recruitment. I think almost every single thing that has happened in drug development in Duchenne could have been improved with earlier patient involvement in trial design. We've done a lot of work in Duchenne with just endpoint development, and that definitely needs patient involvement, especially when you have a progressive disease that has a broad spectrum of patients with different levels of ability and disability. So I'm not sure what the original question was, but that's my input about hope. Because
Well, I
hope,
think
if it weren't for hope, a lot of patients with these devastating conditions wouldn't be able to go on. And it is something that is central to our lives, hope. And we've had, our community is more experienced, and we have had a lot of heartbreak, and we have had a lot of failed trials that dashed hope. You have to pick yourself back. As long as there's new stuff in the pipeline all the time, I think that's important. We need a steady stream of hope, because hope can be, it's never dashed, but it can be disappointing. But as long as there's the next thing, and the fact that we might have learned something from a failed study is tremendously helpful and provides patients with a lot of comfort, even if a trial failed, to know that the participation moved the field forward, or contributed to the body of scientific knowledge. This is also important, and it all kind of relates to hope.
I mean, they just to see that somebody's working on their disease, their condition. I always say it might be something this good or this good, but it's you want to know that people are paying attention to it, no matter how rare it might be.
I think it's communication as well, isn't it? We were talking in the room before the webinar started about, people even knowing what clinical trials are, especially when they're first diagnosed. So I think it's really around the communication in that early phase of communicating with people, that it is early, it is investigational. And I think, there are ways to make sure you're not providing false hope just in your communication strategies as well, which I think really tie into co-creation.